And welcome to Ramp Up to Retirement with your host, Dan Reese. Dan, it is really, really good to see you again. How you been?
Been great. Yep. It's sunny, too sunny almost in Michigan right now, which is not a common thing.
I don't know, man. I'm so tired of such a dark gray winter. I love the sun. I could do without 100 plus degrees here in New Jersey, but I like the sun. So
yeah, me too. I'm with you.
I'm excited about this, the subject of this podcast today, because you talk about a purposeful retirement, and I'm intrigued by that. And what do you mean by that, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, in general, retirement's a super exciting thing, right? You work your whole life. You're like, it's coming. Like, I mean, there's people that have countdown calendars. There's people that have even to the minute countdown of when they're going to be able to be out. But, it's kind of interesting. Why we want to talk about this today is what happens next. Because sometimes you're so excited to get to that finish line, you haven't really thought a whole lot about after the finish line. How are you going to fill your days? What are you going to do? All these things that really matter in living a purposeful life in retirement, right?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. But you think about when you work, that's kind of your purpose a lot of times, right? And that eats up a ton of the hours of the week. And so that transition can be really significant. So we just want to talk about that today.
Yeah, it is really big. And the reason I like this topic is because I know a lot of people who retired and suddenly were like, whoa, this is really, really different than I thought it was going to be. And, it makes sense because as you just said, most people work at least 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. A lot of the people I know worked way more than 40 hours a week.
Yeah.
And they never thought about how much time it occupied in their life or how much time it occupied on their calendar. And suddenly that is a big vacuum now.
Yeah, there's no question. There's this big shift. And part of it's just psychological because when you think about it, we're going to talk a lot about calendars today, right? But when you're working, I mean, a lot of people have their calendar at work. Like I've got this meeting at 1 or I've got to do this at 2 or whatever it might be. But the big part of it is, you have to go to work and you have to be there like call it 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock. Yep. And so right away, your day, you have the psychology around it is, hey, I know tomorrow's Tuesday, it's a work day. I need to get up. I go there, and then when you get there, you already have maybe the meetings and different things lined up for that day. But in general, your time is kind of spoken for, right? For the most part.
Oh, yeah.
And so this big psychological change of changing from having that defined work schedule into having, for most people, like nothing, right? There's no schedule, it's like, oh, I'm retired. I don't have a schedule. And what they find maybe, and we'll talk about it, that may not actually be a good thing, that having no schedule, right?
Oh, no, I'm with you, Dan. In fact, I would argue strenuously that having a calendar or occupying your time makes a big, big, big difference. I know a guy who retired early, and he retired and bought a condo down on a golf course in Florida, and he was a scratch golfer to begin with, and he plays golf endlessly now.
Yeah.
Although he's like, Bill, there's only so much golf I can play, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. And I mean, and the thing is, like, a lot of people talk about like the honeymoon phase, which I actually am kind of a big proponent of. You get done working, just take a couple months to just unwind, if you will, kind of like, all right, let's detox from work a little bit, like get into like more of a normal, I don't have to get up. I can relax, literally kind of let some of that stress go. And you'll hear a lot of people say, I didn't even realize I was under that much stress at work until I like just detoxed for a month or two and was like, whoa, I'm actually much more relaxed. Right. But that honeymoon phase after that kind of goes quickly. And then if you don't have a bit of a game plan in place, it can cause some substantial issues. And we've had clients that have retired and initially came in a couple months later and said, hey, I'm not doing great, which is kind of sad in many ways. Yeah. But the reality was they were so used to that regimen. And a lot of people, like you were mentioning, that worked way more than 40 hours, they didn't really realize how little of extra time they really had.
Right.
They would get home and they would do a few things and they had to go to bed because maybe they were working 10, 12-hour days, and so there really wasn't much time. And so if that's all taken away and you have this big void in your day, that's where you got to get into kind of being proactive, which is why we're talking about that today. So,
yeah, no, it is really interesting. And I'm going to, like, I know a person who retired and she was so concerned coming up to retirement that she wouldn't know what to do. She had a job that started literally, not part-time, but a job that started literally 2 weeks after she retired. Yeah. And, long story made short, it was a mistake because she suddenly realized I went from one thing to another thing and I never stopped to think, hey, I don't have to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. I don't have to do any of this. I don't have to do anything I don't want to do right now. Yeah. And instead dove right into another structure.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes you just need that reset, right? You kind of need, and that's what we're talking about, that little bit of a reset. But one thing as we talk through this, I think is really important too, is that when you think of like kind of creating a retirement lifestyle, a retirement schedule, if you will, you also don't want to go crazy, right? Yeah. Like you just said, you've got to have some balance between extremism. So you don't want to be filling every minute of every day up, right? But you also don't want to have nothing on the calendar. So you wake up every day and you're kind of almost depressed because you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do all day, right? So that's good. As we talk about this, I think it's important to keep that in mind, is that this is not about extremism. Like many things in life, moderation tends to be a really good option. And so we'll get into that some.
That's great. So how do we do this? Let's call it a retirement rhythm. How do we get into, we've been in a work rhythm. How do we get into a retirement rhythm?
Yeah. And so like we, as human beings, we like kind of like, what do I want to say? Kind of repetition, if you will, right? So like a simple example is that we have a lot of clients, and it's funny, even my parents have done this for years. Oh, it's say Tuesday morning, it's our day to go to the grocery store. We go to Meijer on Tuesday morning, get all our groceries, and it's like, they know they're doing that, right? And it's Wednesday and we do this. We have breakfast with the, our retiree group or whatever it might be. Yeah. And so they get into, that's what we start calling a rhythm, right? So you kind of know we've got these things coming up. And I think this applies universally to almost everyone. We look, as human beings, we look forward to upcoming things. You know what I mean? It could be, our grandkids have a baseball game tonight or whatever it might be. And I'd really challenge anyone to think about this. When you reflect on it and you have stuff coming up, you tend to you're happier, right? Yeah. You've got things that are coming up. Now,
you're
if you look at your calendar,
things.
That's kind of that rhythm. We've got these things coming up. We're feeling good about it. Now, on the flip side, we've had those days where it's one thing after another. That's not a great feeling, right? We're like, and all you're thinking about
that's like a work feeling.
I got to get to this next thing, and I got this coming and that coming. And I had that discussion with my mom the other day because they had a really busy week. And keep in mind, my parents are, 88 years old, so they're still moving around pretty good. But my mom was like, I think we've done enough this week. She was kind of like, she's like, I just want to be home. We've been going, right? So that retirement rhythm is this idea of kind of like, creating a structure through the week. And really, when you think about fulfillment retirement, that structure needs to include different areas. Like fitness is a great thing. And a lot of people find that they finally have time to like do some fitness, whether it's walking or yoga or whatever it might be when they're retired that they didn't have the time for when they were working. Yep. That's something that can really be a great way or something to really integrate into your week. There's faith-based activities, different church group things, that all kinds of stuff out there that, are available, right? So like that might be something, it could be a Bible study. It could be like you're doing dinners for, like I know our church, one of the groups they have is when there's people that pass away, they all chip in and they do lunches and things afterwards, And so there's these different things. But there's also things around mental stimulation, right? You don't want to just shut off your brain when you retire. It's been proven, I'm sure you've read about this stuff, your brain kind of acts like a muscle. If you quit using it, it atrophies, right? And so making sure you're doing those types of things, like putting those into your schedule and into your things, like it can be simple things like crossword puzzles, Sudoku, whatever, right? It can be all kinds of stuff. I mean, it could be even following along on Jeopardy and answering as many questions as you can, right?
Yep.
But, you're thinking about the mental things, social interaction. It's so, so important. Thinking about, hey, I want to systematically make sure you could have a goal every month. I want to make sure I'm having lunch or breakfast with somebody maybe I used to work with, or maybe someone I don't see so much anymore. Right. And then other social interaction going back to like, could be faith-based activities. It could be golf leagues. It could be my parents square danced for years, right?
Oh,
like
nice.
It was just
that's great. That's great.
I mean, things that like you go out bowling leagues, like just different things, cards, whatever. But really making sure you get that integrated into your retirement rhythm. We're going to make sure we do these things consistently over time, right?
Yeah.
But and then you have to have rest too and leisure, right? So you got to have stuff that's just kind of hanging out. But Bill, what we're getting at really is just this idea of taking these core areas of life and making sure you continue to integrate those into your weekly schedules and monthly schedules so that you can be fulfilled, week in and week out.
I'm curious, when you talk to your clients, do you find that sometimes you have to reassure your clients that it is okay to have some downtime? It is okay to have a little rest and leisure, if it were?
Yeah. And I mean, I think the other thing too, when you think about that with leisure and rest, some people like vacations are a big part of that. Yeah. And so we talk about, they're like, oh, I would love to do this, whatever, European vacation, but we could never do that, right? Well, maybe you can. Now, maybe not every year, but maybe once every 3 years or something like that, you could do one of those bigger things. And so that's part of it too, right? That's that. What are we looking forward to? What are we excited about? And so that's kind of where that, really getting fulfilled is that idea of what you're talking about, mixing that stuff together and including leisure and being okay with, wow, we have a day where we don't have to do anything. This is kind of cool. We can kind of hang out at home and don't have have a big thing on the calendar. So
you got any tips? How do you deal with your clients? You got any tips you give them in terms of how to go about doing this?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of books written, but I will tell you, I mean, and this is newer technology that I'm sure most people have heard of, AI and ChatGPT.
Oh, Lord, yes. Yeah.
I can tell you one of the best things you can do if you're kind of sitting there going, hey, I don't even know how to go about this. How would I even begin to create any type of retirement schedule? Well, here's my best advice. You can get on ChatGPT. It's free for the basic version. You just create a little login and there's, you can watch YouTube videos on it. There's all kinds of stuff that'll show you the basics of using it. You can ask it. You could say, hey, I enjoy golfing. I enjoy, education. I enjoy these different activities that you like, right? And you can tell it, hey, help me create a weekly schedule with 2 to 3 things maybe, or whatever, how many things you want per day on that schedule. And leave Saturday and Sunday blank, maybe, as an example. And you will be shocked at what it creates for you. Like, I've messed around with this, and it is amazing. And it even has,
that's incredible.
And I mean, it even has, you could say to it, hey, I know I want to exercise 3 days a week, right? You could get much more granular and say, hey, help me create, I'm 65 years old. I don't want anything high impact. I don't want anything, really over the top for exercise. But I'd love to have 3 activities, a week to do to stay in shape, right? And it will spit out these different things. It's amazing. And so all of a sudden, and it might not be perfect, but it's, how our minds work. Once you get that starting point, you can then take it and you can manipulate it and get it how you like it. And even with that, you can tell ChatGPT to help you do that and it'll change it. I mean, it's really amazing.
I've heard all kinds of uses for ChatGPT. Dan, you're the first one that I've heard suggest you can use it to help create a retirement schedule if you would like.
Yeah. One of the things I heard a lady talking about, which was really interesting to me, she said, I've never been good at like gardening or all these different things. And one of the goals that she had was to create this, those big planters that you do in the summertime, like with all the different flowers in them. And you get some that hang over the side and kind of grow and stuff in the middle. And, anyway, there's a kind of a science around how you do that. She was like, I got on ChatGPT and said, I've never done this. I want to create some of these planners. How do I do it? And it gave her a full education around how to do that. And so you can think outside the box too. And like when you're thinking of activities in retirement, filling that schedule, there could be things like maybe there's cooking or grilling or different things that you've never done. And you can get on ChatGPT and like it will help you figure out ways to do it. This lady told us she actually was able to get the full shopping list when she went to the greenhouse on what to buy, all the stuff to buy. And one of the things they didn't have, she had her phone there and she's like, they don't have this. What's an alternative? And it gave her an alternative. And she was able to then take the instructions, do these beautiful planners. And she's like, it was so cool because, I never thought I'd be able to do that.
And people talk about AI being a scary thing. And you're giving me a perfect example of AI not quite so scary and actually very helpful.
Yeah, it is. It's really neat because, I've messed around with it a little bit, not a ton, but some. Yeah. And it continues to amaze me, the different things that it can help you with, right? And so that's just a great example. It's like, let's create that retirement schedule. Let's create an exercise program. Let's brainstorm on what are some ideas that people, do in retirement, activities people do in retirement. It'll give you a list of things. And you'd be like, oh, you know what? I never thought of that.
Yeah. I'm interested since you've played around with it in this aspect. We're not all alike. Some of us are more extroverted than other people. Can you, in your experiments, as it were, did you say, look, I'm introverted. Mm-hmm. I like low key social events. I don't like parties and that kind of thing. Can you even adjust it to that degree?
Oh, there's no doubt. You can basically tell it, hey, this is my personality. Matter of fact, as you get into using those tools more, you can actually go into your profile, if you will, and you can kind of tell it, this is who I am. This is kind of, and as you use those tools, it does learn more about you. You know what I mean? With the types of questions you ask and things like that. And it helps because it starts to answer things more and more custom to you, right? And so it doesn't forget, put it that way. It's not like us husbands that don't hear our wives half the time, right? It hears everything.
I don't know what you're talking about, Dan.
Yeah,
I have no idea what you're talking about. What is that?
Yeah, so, but no, that's a really good point.
Yeah, no. So I'm kind of curious now. This is great. You've got a tool to help you do this. But I guess one of the blessings of retirement is that you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
You don't have to get up at a certain time or whatever if you don't want to.
Right.
But you go back to your idea about extremes. You can also overschedule yourself. You got any tips for just like, oh, hey, Dan just called me and asked me if my wife, wanted to go out to dinner together. And it's not on my calendar.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. That's why the point is you don't overschedule. Having one or two things to do each day is great. You've got to have room for number one. Sometimes you just feel like hanging out, right? And you don't want to feel like you got to go do something. And the other thing is the stuff like that comes up, like you're talking about. Your buddy calls and says, "Hey, it's great out. We're you want to come out to the lake for a pontoon ride? It's a beautiful night." And being able to be like, "Yeah, absolutely." And so this is all about balance, right? And there's no secret recipe of saying this is exactly what you should do. I do think there's some of the core tenets of you want to make sure that research has shown to stay happy that you do integrate the different areas like fitness and mental awareness and, these different areas that have shown to really add to your quality of life. And that really applies no matter what stage you're in. It's just you have more time when you get to retirement, right? You can be more intentional about some of those things.
Yes.
But no, absolutely. You want to stay flexible and stay away from extremes. And I like what you said about, hey, I'm more of an introvert. I'm more of an extrovert. doing some research and saying, hey, ChatGPT, what are great activities? I'm introverted and these are some of my interests. What would be things that I might find fun in retirement? And you can talk to ChatGPT just like you would your friend. That's the thing that's kind of cool about it. You don't have to be all perfect and type everything out perfectly, So it's kind of fun.
A great example of that would be that where I live, there's a locally owned small little bookshop not far from my house. They have author readings. They have really small gatherings where authors will come in and read from their books and sign the books, and it's an event that's not a loud party. It's not a big bar. It's a quiet, more low key kind of thing to do.
Yeah.
But so that and maybe ChatGPT can look at what is going on around you within your local area and say, yeah, there are things that are happening that really fit whatever your personality might be.
Yeah. One thing I just thought about too, like a lot of people, they retire and like travel's a really common thing, right? I want to travel. And I kind of look at, there's the people that just want to kind of stay in the U.S. That's their thing, right? There's so many things in the U.S. They like to be able to drive, right? They don't necessarily want to do all the big air travel and all those things. And then, of course, there's people internationally. Yeah. Well, one of the cool things, and this works both internationally and, of course, more in U.S. based, but you might say, hey, we're thinking of taking a trip through pick an area of the country. We're going to go out to the national parks area, like in Utah. Ooh. And, out in those areas. Right. And you could get, again, ChatGPT, a great tool to go in and say, hey, we're going to make this road trip. Can you map out a series of stops for us, for things that would be really interesting to see? Mm-hmm. And it'll go through and it'll create, kind of a trip for you, right? Now, you might look at that and then start doing further research on areas, go, you know what, I want to skip that one. Let's find a replacement for, spot B. We don't want to go there. And it'll help you create it. And so one of the things that we find is that people, they just kind of go on these road trips like, well, we're going to see what we see, which is okay. But there's also some kind of like stress around that. Like, I don't know what we're going to do. Using tools like that, you can kind of lay out some basics, right? Now, it doesn't mean you can't go off from that and change plans, as you're going through on the trip.
Right.
But it gives you a lot more peace saying, okay, we're going here first. We're going to check that out. Then we're going to go here. Now, we may go someplace in between. But our core trip is already kind of put together. So, the old days when you had the AAA travel planner, like you'd call them and they'd give you the maps, they do all those things. Yeah. It's kind of like that, only it's much more dynamic, meaning that you can interact with it and really come up with some cool stuff. So there's so many possibilities.
Well, it's really interesting because everything you just talked about is a perfect metaphor for what this podcast has been about. You can think it's cool. I'll get in the car and we'll just go. You could do that. But as you just noted, it might be a little stressful and it might be more fun to think, oh, there are these points along the way. There are these things that we can do and I can do and help construct a more purposeful trip or in this case, retirement.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. One thing too, that I think is a great idea as you're preparing for retirement, you think, hey, I want to retire in a year. Start working on this then. Start working on, hey, I'm retiring in a year and I want to start putting together a retirement schedule that includes these types of activities, right? Fitness, whatever it might be. And that kind of, what that does, I think if you're proactive about it, that can actually reduce stress around retirement because you can kind of know, hey, now I know when I retire, first month I'm just hanging out, doing nothing or whatever. I'm just going to chill. But then after that, these are the things I'm going to start doing more proactively and kind of working through this schedule. Again, the known, the something to look forward to, right? Yeah. All these ideas of feeling like you got a plan, right? We talk about financial planning all the time, obviously. That's what this is about. And what's interesting is that a lot of the stuff that I do for clients, tax planning, Social Security planning, healthcare planning, investment planning, all these different things, estates, that stuff, I mean, has to be done, right, for a successful retirement.
Sure.
But to be honest, the reason people hire us is so that they can go focus on the other stuff that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
The stuff they enjoy, where they have peace of mind, the money piece is taken care of. We want to go do these things that we enjoy, right? And so it's all about planning. It's just really figuring out what to outsource, if you will, right, to a qualified professional, and what to maybe take on yourself that you can have more fun doing. So,
that is great, and it's really well put. For people who are listening to this podcast who are clients, they obviously know how to get a hold of you, but maybe we've got a few people that are not clients. What would be the best way for them to reach out and explore maybe having a relationship with you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way is to start with our website, which is just averywealth.com. And just like it sounds, AveryWealth.com. You go to the Insights tab. We have wonderful resources out there about like things to consider before retirement, checklists, stuff on taxes, stuff on estates, everything imaginable right around money, lifestyle, things like that. That's the first thing I recommend to everybody. So you can start getting a feel for what we're about, right? And we're about not only taking care of the financial side, but really helping you to live a great life in retirement as well. And then the other thing is you can always click the contact us right on there. It'll shoot us a quick email and we'll reach out to you. And you can always call our office, 517-783-1695. You can always call us. We're happy to schedule a call and talk with you and go through what your concerns are and if it would make sense to sit down and talk further, based on your circumstances. So
yeah,
we won't bite, as I say, Bill. We won't bite.
No, I can attest to the fact that you do not bite, as a matter of fact. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast and thinking I didn't have a pencil or write that down, don't worry about it. It's in the show notes. You can just check the show notes and when you're not in your car or when you get a moment to write things down. The other thing you can do, by the way, is if you're not a subscriber, hit follow. The beauty of that is that then if you're a subscriber, every time Dan drops a new episode, you're notified. And you can give that one a listen as well. And if you like it, I would ask you that you tell people about it, please, and share it with other people. Word of mouth promotion is excellent. So much better than a bot recommendation. So until next time, I'm Bill Tucker. On behalf of Dan and everybody at Avery Wealth, thank you for taking the time to listen today. We'll catch you next time. Thank you for listening to Ramp Up Your Retirement. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Visit our website at www.averywealth.com or give us a call at 517-783-1695. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Avery Wealth. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning. The opinions voiced in Ramp Up to Retirement with Dan Reese are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Guests on the show may not be affiliated with CWM LLC. Views and comments by guests may not be representative of CWM LLC. Investment advisory services are offered through CWM LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Carson Partners, a division of CWM LLC, is a nationwide partnership of advisors.